Joshi sir, working faculty, students, fraternity of the Department of Pharmacology, everyone associated with this program, where we hope that covers everyone in this room. Assalamu alaikum, namaste, sir. Before I dwindle into my topic and I let you know what pharmacovigilance is, as I told you, basically we are playing this session in 5 presentations. I will give you a cross outlook of all the basic points of pharmacovigilance. Before I start, I would love to congratulate the Department of Pharmacology for making sure that a program as such, Pharmacovigilance Week, is celebrated, rather felicitated in full spirit and letter. I would love you all applause for the Department of Pharmacology, please. Now, before I move into the topic, I don't want, first of all, to start with, I would say, rather boring jargons of science. So, I'll tell you a short story. It's a story about a hen and a rooster. They aren't from some alien country or alien planet. Basically, they come from Kashmir. They live somewhere around the Gulf, so that the setting is very clear for you all. So, what happens, the hen, she's very contemplative, some person, as people, most of the people around are. She's a person, she's basically a hen who loves to contemplate for most of the issues of the world. So one day they are making a big walk around the dung, and in a contemplative mood, she talks to the rooster. And she's like, hey, Roosty, why don't we do one thing? We do sort of all the big, tiny, right, left, center, all the problems of the world. The rooster, very normal in his thinking and all this stuff, he was like, okay, that's okay, but we are just a hen and a rooster. What can we do? The world is too big for 2 chickens like us. So the hen told, why don't we do one thing other than all the big problems of the world? We start one at a time. So the rooster was, flapping around in the air. He said, that's a good idea. Let's start. He told, so what are you planning? What's your vision? She said, we will start from the hunger of the world. Let's start from eradicating the hunger. The rooster was, it's a fine idea, rather. I like it. But how are we going to do it? The hen, in her own contemplative told, I will do one thing, I will lay eggs for the world, tons and tons, rather loads of eggs. And you do one thing, you give your flesh. So the rooster, after thinking for a moment, told her, you are going to give eggs, that's a contribution. I'm going to give my body, my flesh, that's a commitment. What I want you all to know is, there are loads of professions, there are many myriad professions we all can belong to. But the fact is, we all know healthcare industry, it's not a profession, it's a calling. Nonetheless, we all would have inventors or something had money being the goal, but we are here because we want to be part of, the healing hand of the God. That's why we are here. As doctors, as healthcare professionals, what do? We right the wrongs of the people, their physical wrongs, their emotional wrongs, their social, sexual, or behavioral wrongs. We right them by giving the drugs. By giving drugs or the materials that we use, we also harm them. In righting their wrongs, there is some wrong we have what we call ADR. I will not go into ADR. But there's a presentation that will await you and you'll be given a full extension of the thing. But the thing is pharmacovigilance. Let's now move to the word. This pharmacovigilance is one part of that commitment, not contribution. There are loads of commitments that we have to give to the service. This pharmacovigilance is one part of that. Pharmacovigilance, let's move to the word, the origin of the word. Basically, it's a bisyllabic word, pharmakon and vigilante. Pharmakon is what its origins in Greek, which means any medicinal substance of any kind, type, or whatever, where from it's derived. And vigilante means to keep and watch on. That is basically its origin in Latin. So that's pharmacovigilante or pharmacovigilance, what has been accepted term from now onwards. What you all need to understand, it's a branch of science which detects, assesses, understands, and prevents the ADRs. ADRs basically, we all know, we have therapeutic range, what we call the healing range of a drug. Other than that, there is, drug show effect, which does not appeal to our healing or whatever our desired efforts. We say that's ADR. So basically, you will get a full-fledged topic on that. Let's dive into the history. How pharmacovigilance came into existence? That's a very vital question. It all started in, let's jump 2 centuries around back. It all started in 1750s. There was a scientist, his name was James Lind. What James Lind did, he collected some around hundreds of patients. These are the first clinical trials in the history of healthcare. He, they were all the patients of scurvy. He treated them with lemon juice. So basically, he did not go. It's a clinical trial. That was more of an experiment for him. So what he did was that became, the first registered clinical trials in the world. Moving forward, there were some tragedies that shaped this subject, that made sure it comes into our hand. First of all, let's move to the 1930s. what happens is, we all have studied pharmacology, we have studied the coca, the bacteria. The bacterial infection basically affects our throat and other parts. So we use sulfonylamide. It's a drug we use to treat it. Basically, it used to be in powder form, it was given in tablets. There was a company which name was Masco. Masco thought, the people who have throat infection with streptococcus, why don't we do one thing? We prescribe them, we make something with an elixir. We make liquid out of it so it becomes easy to swallow. So they use DEG to make, that was very blendized in those days. So they used DEG as a solvent for sulfonylamide, and it was used. That proved to be toxic, and they had not, basically there were some primitive, rather baseline FDA regulations then. We did not have a full-fledged FDA then. So they did not occur to them, and without doing animal trials, they put it in the market, and it led to killing of lots of people. So the fact was, it was taken aback after some years when they knew this is the cause of the hundreds of deaths. Then going to 1950s, chloromethylene toxicity that created lots of applause chemical. But these are tiny, minuscule, parts of the game. But the one tragedy that shaped this science, that led us, that clearly made it, vital, that made it very vital for us to create a science called pharmacovigilance is halamide disaster. It happened in around 1960s. Basically, more than 90% of the pregnant women, they suffer from morning nausea. So what doctors did, they would use thalidomide so that it can, it helped them, it alleviated the symptoms. But the problem was, lots of kids, there was a very grotesque big disaster. They called it the monster of the time. Even some of I remember I was going through a BCC documentary on the thing, and they had mentioned, it was called the start of Illuminati, because kids were born without legs, without, body parts, without most of the sensory systems. Basically, some had, hands and legs more like the fish. And the fact is, it took the world at a ball, because it was not cases hundreds and dozens, it was cases in thousands that took world by shock, because we had to do something. World agencies, world regulatory authorities, WHO all came to the sense in 1968. Basically, the biggest effect that came in when we made in 1968, WHO started its first center at Uppsala, Sweden. It was a thalidomide disaster. Basically, what thalidomide is, it's a drug. It has two enantiomers, R and S. I'm very sure in 12th class chemistry, NCRT, you have read how enantiomers work, their tidal centers and all this stuff. Basically, one of the enantiomers happens to be toxic to our body, R1, and another enantiomer that does good to our body. But the fact is, what doctors and the healthcare system and most of the people did not know, our body has a mechanism. There's an interconversion of these two enantiomers in our body. So it doesn't matter if you give R or S, you're going to land with both of them, and that's going to give you toxic. This time, thalidomide is used. It's used to treat some skin infections, some cancers. But the fact is, from large scale or something like morning nausea or pregnant, it has been totally done away. So in 1968, to cut it short, 1968 we start first international center, Sweden, Uppsala National Monitoring Center, International Monitoring Center. Then moving on in 1996, India starts its clinical trials. A year after 1997, Ghaziabad Center that gets its affiliation to Uppsala Center. 1998, the government of India passes an MCI bill. In 2000, pharmacovigilance program and its preliminary baseline was ready. In 2010, it was put into the scale, and after, I guess, 12 years where we are in this room celebrating the second week of pharmacovigilance ever celebrated in our country. That was a brief history. Now, that was, about how all these dates work. Now, the fact is, this pharmacovigilance program of India, what's the mission and vision of it? Because everything that you start, that is a core why. A why that you look to, a why that you follow, a why that you chase through. Doesn't matter which scheme of government you're talking about, whichever the schemes, that has that why. So what's the why? What's the vision and mission of pharmacovigilance program? Going by the very brochure what government of India has provided us, they say the mission is to add to the safety of the drugs, and the long-term vision is to decrease risk-benefit ratio. Basically, in layman's terms, we can say what we are trying to do. We can't make an absolute drug. We can't make a drug that has, that's 100%. It's going to have toxicities. As they say, excess of everything is bad in layman's terms. Drugs will have problems. Doesn't matter they are minuscule or gigantic in scale, but they will have problems. So we are trying to do one thing. We are trying to increase that benefit and decrease on the risk ratio. That's what our main goal is. That's what for pharmacovigilance program is. Now the fact is, how does it operate for somebody like you and me? Okay, this was history. Okay, that's their vision. That's their why statement. How does it work? Basically, it works from you and me. It works from any layman. But the fact is, as we are starting any, it starts from healthcare professionals. I told you, you're the roosters in the game. You have to give your flesh, full commitment. So it starts from you. We do one thing. We fill up area forms and we send them to our local monitoring centers. They go to their regions. Basically, what are regions? We have 4 regions. 4 regions for Pharmacovigilance program of India. In West, we have Mumbai, Bollywood Steel. In East, we have Kolkata. Was one to add to that, memory synapse of yours. In the north we have Chandigarh, and in the south we have Tipu Sultan, Mysore. So basically these regions, these areas, they collaborate. That and all those 4 regions, they are connected, to the center at Ghaziabad, which sends its reports and all the areas and information that it had basically from the very baselines to Uppsala, and that sends its report to the regulatory authorities of the country. For example, the second nation being India, and then they regulate that, they dictate, they send dictatums, they send the very provision, supervision for the pharmacology or pharmaceutical companies that work in a country. That was basic working of it. So that was how it works. Now that was how all this program works. The fact is, now you know the history, you know the mission statement, you know basically how it works. Now what are the objectives, the very vital objectives of the said topic? What are those? We have some 5-7 objectives. Objective number 1, that is regulatory authorities of India, they get an upper hand on management of all the drugs. Objective number 2, we have an international system for the drugs and their regulation, their safety. That takes a launch pad for all of us to take benefit from. Objective number 1, with evidence-based medicine that has come into recently, we're also studying them in our books. That gets more of a boom and boost from that. Objective number 3, we get some national excellence centers which are going to work not only for pharmacovigilance, but we can kind of widen the gap and put them on the table going on and on. Not only that, it's also going to be increase the benefits and reduce the risk of the drugs that we are doing. These are some of the basic objectives that have been carried on as we go. Now the goals. Objectives are okay. So we are starting. So what are the goals? What are those vivid goals that we are trying to achieve? Because every program that you start, it does not have a set of, I would say, rather very concrete short-term goals and long-term goals. It goes rather in a maze. You have to understand what are the main goals. Short-term goals. Number 1, healthcare professionals, they will be encouraged to fill area forms. Short-term goal number 2, all government recognized MCI colleagues and not private ones, only government ones, who are going to fill these areas. It's not mandatory, but it's encouraged. And long-term goals is, it's not going to be something of a session that we are doing here between us and college. It will be mandatory for every healthcare professional. Doesn't matter whether he is in private or government sector. He will have to fill basically this time we fill the forms, it will go into e-phase, electronic phase. But it will be mandatory for every healthcare professional to fill these forms. Not only that, doesn't matter whether you hail from a private or a government institution, it's going to be must. These are its goals. Now the pharmacovigilance program of India, it has not been reduced. We cannot be a henchman for something that's very tiny or minuscule in its nature. It's expanding. It's expanding like everything in the world. We have hemovigilance. It's going into transfusion and problems there. We have material vigilance, the devices we use. Even NACO is putting a bar on it. They're getting a part of it. So the fact is, pharmacovigilance is going to shape how we as healthcare professionals work. It's going to be maybe not today. Today it's a growing science. It's something that's budding, that's offshoots, that's all branching. But in decades to come, maybe 2 decades, 3 decades from here, the disastrous thalidomide that's always going to take an unkempt on our imagination. Such was the grotesque results that came from the very tragedy. It's going to take and put them down. So the fact is, in years to come, decades to come, drugs are going to be safer. And areas they will be in detail, we have a presentation for them, so they will be taught here. Before I wind up, basically, I'm not going to put in more scientific jargons. Before I wind up, I would love to have a question. I would appreciate if anybody has any question regarding pharmacovigilance program. Absolutely, students, not teachers. I guess there is no question. Thank you. You have been awesome listeners. Thank you, everyone.